Hi everybody, and thank you for watching DataViz. Today we're going to talk about Entity Framework Code First. Let's jump right into it. The first step in creating a Code First Entity Framework application is to go ahead and create a new project. You can choose any type of project that you'd want to access the database with. I'll just do a console application for simplicity of this video. Let's just call it Entity Framework Easy Example. Go ahead and click Next. Now you're going to choose either .NET Core 3.1, which is the long-term support, .NET 5, which is the current, or .NET 6 if you have it showing up here, which is the one that we're currently getting those pre-release packages for. Go ahead and click Create. You're going to need to install two NuGet packages right away, Entity Framework Core Tools and Design. So right-click on your project, go to Manage NuGet Packages, go to Browse. Make sure in your top right your package source includes NuGet.org. It should by default, and we're going to just type that in. Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.tools and install that. I accept. Now we're going to install Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.design. Install. Accept. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to create our conceptual models, and from there we'll generate the database. So best practices is usually to create a separate data access project, but in very small projects it's also very common to just have them right in here. So what I'm going to do is just add a folder for now, create a new folder, we'll call it data models, and then I'm going to right click on that folder and add a new class. All right, so we'll just build another C# class. We're going to call this, how about student, since we often hear students in classes and teachers as examples in a database. So let's do that here as well. We'll call it student. So at this stage of the game, all we're creating is just public classes that have nothing but properties in them. So I'm going to go ahead and type prop, hit tab twice, and start spelling out what would be in my student. So you're going to want a primary key, so let's make that an integer. We'll just call it student ID. And then let's create a string, perhaps student name. And I won't get too in-depth because it's just an example, but we want a few fields that would reference each other. So I don't know, maybe age. And then we'll go ahead and perhaps say which class the student is in. So we could do public class. And class is a keyword, so you got to be careful with that. If it tries to automatically lowercase the c, just Control Z, and then it'll say, oh, it is something I do not recognize. Perhaps the student might be in multiple classes, so let's make it a list of classes. And as you can see, we're already including system.collections.generic up here. So it's easy to tell where that list is coming from. And we'll just call this student classes. Now I'm going to left click on class, and we're going to generate the class called class. So if you some of the choices it presents to you is generate class in a new file or generate class. Click generate class in a new file, and it's going to put it in the same folder that the student class was in. So I can just click on it, and all I have to do is add the properties. You'll notice it's already a public class because it was required to be public in order for a student to access it. So now I can just type prop tab tab. We can do class ID, prop tab tab, string tab. We can give it class name, and let's give it some other interesting features like we could do maybe max class size. We could do language, so I like to do an enum for that. So I'll do prop tab tab, and let's call it language. Oops, Control Z if it tries to autocomplete, which you don't want. Class language. And now we need to generate that type, or that enum. So we could generate the type in a new class. But what I'm going to do is just create a folder because I like to use enums. Add folder enums. In that folder, I'm going to right click, add class, and just how I did interface in some of my other videos, I'm adding class, but then I'm going to change it from class to enums, just like I did class to interface. So let's call this language. And in here, we'll do public enum language. Just list out the languages that you want to have. English, Spanish, these are just examples, Russian, French, etc., etc. So now if you go back to your class, I've tabbed over here in the data models, you'll see that there's no red underline here. It understands that language is the enum that you just created. So save all your files, and now let's go ahead and create our initial migration. We expect to see the references between language, the three files between language, class, and student to be reflected in the database, and then we can see how that looks. Let's go ahead and create our context. That's going to be a step that will always be needed regardless of what kind of data you're working with, students and teachers or financials, whatever. So right click on your data models and we're going to add a new class. We're going to call it context. Now this class needs to inherit from DB context. So put that colon and put DB context. If it underlines in red, you can control dot on that. And you can install a package if you don't have it. I'm going to install Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. Find and install latest version. If that gives you any trouble, try to get a version that's along the very similar or the same version number as the earlier Entity Framework packages that we installed for tools and design. But it probably won't give you any trouble. And now in here, we're going to list out the database sets for our student and class and any other classes that you built that you intend to become tables. So let's do each of those DB sets. So it's going to be DB set with capital D, capital S. And then in the carets here, we're going to put the class that we had, which is just called class and student. And then after that, the actual table name that you want. So if you wanted to set the table name a little different, I'm just going to call it class. It's best to keep things clear and concise. And then getter and setter. Student. Getter and setter. Now, one thing I didn't mention here is because we're doing sets, this is the perfect time to pluralize these so that your table names make a little bit more sense. Definitely so your code makes a little bit more sense, because if you get several students in a response, wouldn't it be nice to call it students? Now next is something that you're going to have to do, that we're actually going to override a method that's in DB context, and this is where you're going to state where your database is. This is really important because if you want to generate a database, you got to tell it where to put it and what type of database it is, right? So in our examples here, we've been setting up for SQL Server, but it's going to be very similar. So let's go ahead and override it, and I'm actually just going to paste that in here and go full screen and explain what we're doing. So we're going to override a protected method called onConfiguring. It's protected because we're going to have potentially a connection string in here, although I do not recommend you leave it in here. I recommend that once you've generated your file, you move this off somewhere else. So we got protected override void onConfiguring, and then the parameters are DB context options builder, options builder. And now here we're going to specify our database connection. That means that we need to go ahead and install another NuGet package specific to SQL Server. So folks doing MySQL and other database types would have different steps here. So I'm going to right click on the project, manage NuGet packages, and once again we're going to search for Microsoft.Entity Framework Core and see what our choices are here. And you can see there's one here, Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.SQL server. And we're going to install that one. Accept, yada yada, save all your files. And now let's go back to where we were in the context class. And as you can see, it's no longer underlined in red. We can finish what we're doing here. I'm just going to put a connection string in here. This is going to vary based on your database. Obviously, you're going to put the database name. Where it's hosted is probably not going to be at a local database. It's probably going to be at an IP address, but maybe while you're developing, you may put it at localhost. All right, so let's keep going. So next up, we're going to run a couple of commands in the Package Manager console. If you don't have it, go to the Tools menu. So go to Tools, and then you're going to go to NuGet Package Manager and then Package Manager console. There's a similar command that can be done with the .NET CLI or command line interface. In this example, I'm using Package Manager because I don't feel like leaving Visual Studio. I'm sure some of you might agree with me, but it really doesn't matter where you go. So in this one, it's going to be add-migration space initial for your first migration. And it is going to generate the classes based on your classes. Generate the classes to create the tables based on your classes. So in your classes, ours are very simple, right? We just have regular properties, but some of our classes reference each other, so it knows to create foreign keys. But there are a bunch of attributes that you could add on top of these classes to say how large the table is, or how many, what the range is. Let's say your IDs need to be between 1 and 1,000, nothing bigger. Or your class names are 255 characters. We can put attributes there, and they'll show up in these generated migration classes. But we'll go into that here in a little bit. Let's just go ahead and get that database created, because I'm sure that's the most exciting part for everybody. So if you do get any errors down here, start first by resolving the NuGet packages. Make sure that the versions are lined up with each other. You don't have some .NET Core 31 along with some .NET 6 or .NET 5. They all need to be somewhat close to each other, and sometimes they need to be exactly the same. So before you dive into 1,000 other possibilities, if you get errors during the step I just did, take a look at your package versions. Next, I'm going to do update-database. Database, not data bash. And that's actually going to connect to the connection string that we entered and generate the database based on the initial migration C# files. Here, if you get errors during this step, oftentimes it could be due to the connection string itself or permissions in the database. Let's see if it works for me. Now let's go over to SQL Server Management Studio and see what this thing generated for us. We're going to need to tell it what to connect to. If you haven't already connected to it the first time, you can get it from your connection string. I'm going to do the local database with the instance name MySQL local DB, connecting with Windows Authentication. As you can see, I have another example database instance here. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. And I've got a few examples within here because I've done things in the past, but here's the new one. And it created the database for us based on the connection string. And within the tables, we've got students, or classes, students, and migrations history. I'll go through each of these real briefly. So students, if you expand this a little bit, has, if we go to keys, primary key of students, which is the student ID, but classes has a foreign key from classes to students, but it also has its primary key. And then the EF migrations history, if I select from that, has just one row for the first initial migration we did. And you can see it has initial there because we used initial in the package manager console. This is important because if we then make changes to the database and we create another migration, the script that SQL will generate, or that C# will generate, the Visual Studio will generate, is going to be how to get from the previous version of the database to the new version of the database based on the classes that you have changed. And we are going to do that because I want to show you guys now how to add a few data annotations to these classes. So getting right into the annotations, there are two namespaces that you will want to think about. And they're system.componentModel.dataAnnotations and also system.componentModel.dataAnnotations.schema. The schema one has a little bit less in it. It's more to do with changes to the column structure. But if we want to think about just regular data annotations, which is kind of what I was referring to earlier, we could change the size and put some whether the field may be required in the database in order to insert a row into that table. So let's take a look at that. Let's start with class name because it's a string field. We can add the attribute max length. It already went green because we already inserted the using there. Why don't we put down required for class size? Now class name and class size have an attribute. Now max length is kind of useless just like this. We have to tell it, what the max length is. So if you put the brackets there and take a look at the choices, there's two different constructors. And the second one, actually you can just specify the length and the other fields are optional. So we'll choose the second one and we'll say it's got a max length of 50, whatever your business case may be. Oftentimes I see 255, but let's put 50. Required doesn't need anything, but there is an optional constructor here. For example, if you want to allow empty strings or not. So we'll just leave it as required. Definitely encourage you to refer to the documentation to see all the different data annotation attributes that are available. But I want to show you now what this will look like when we do a migration and then update that to the database. Go back to your package manager. And if it gets a little confusing with all kinds of information there, just type clear and press return. And we're going to do add-migration. But instead of typing initial, let's give it an information a little bit about what we just did. Max length applied. Press return. Oh, and it lets you know right away too that an operation was scaffolded and may result in the loss of data. So you got to think too, if you weren't doing entity framework code first, even if you're just working in a database project, if you modify the database, you could be losing some data. If you drop a table to recreate it to do something that required the table to be regenerated, Visual Studio doesn't really have a way around that. So you just have to pay attention to the migration it generates, because in some cases it'll do that, in some cases it won't. Just pay attention to things like if you're adding a new column, if it's a required field, make sure it has a default value if there's already a million rows in your table, because you don't want it to generate a class that drops the table. All right, so we've created that migration. If you go down to migrations, you'll see there's the second one there. If we open it up, it has an up and a down column. Up means what is the code that's going to change the database from the previous version of the schema to the new version, and down is to go the other way around. So as you can see, it put that max length of 50 right there. All right, so we're going to go ahead now and update the database. Same command as earlier. Update-database and press return. And now if we go back to SQL Server and we refresh the tables, you could see probably there'll be a second migration here. And here under classes, columns, there's a max size of 50 there. So come back to Visual Studio now. We're going to access that data from the database. So let's do a using statement, and we want context. Now I've went ahead and added using EF example data models, because if you go to context and take a look at the namespace, there it is there. So you can copy and paste it in. So we'll do using context, my context, equal to new context. Oopsies. There we are. And now you should be able to access those tables. So it's student and class. If they don't show up, which mine is not, it might be because it's not public. So let's jump into the context class and look at your DB sets. If you want to access them outside here, you want to have to make it public. Oops. There we go. All right. So now if I hit dot, it should show up in the IntelliSense students. You can add a new student. And in here, we got to specify the new student, of course. All right. Now give it some properties. Student ID is an identity field, so you don't want to specify that unless you've got insert identity turned off in the database. So we'll just give it a name, Joe Smith. And give it a class. Of course, we haven't generated any classes, so we got to build one. And the student might be in multiple classes, but let's just give him one to get started. And again, we'll skip the ID, but we'll specify the rest. Let's make it a French class. Give it a name. I don't know, my first class. Give it a size. As you notice, I'm hitting space, and it's just telling me what needs to be typed because Visual Studio's that smart, right? Give it 12. Should we put him in a second class? We could do that right here. Let's say he's in a French class, but he's also in an English class. My second class. Give it a class size, say 25. You can collapse these this way just to be able to see what you got. You don't need to use regions for that. You can collapse it this way so you know you've created a student and you put it in a couple of classes. So nothing's in the database because we haven't saved it yet. So we'll do myContext.save changes. And then let's go ahead and run it. F5. All right. I'm going to go back over to SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. And I'm going to see what's in classes. There you go. My first class, my second class. Student ID 1 for both because the same student's in both. As you can see, class language, the enumeration is 0, 1, 2, 3 for those 4 languages that we created, because by default it makes them integers. I have another video on enums. It's kind of interesting if you want to see how that works with some of the bitwise operations too. But anyways, back on track here. Let's look at students. And there's Joe Smith right there. So now let's go ahead and select some data with Visual Studio. So I'm going to comment this out. But I want to keep this first line because we need the context to access the data as well. So let's do var my classes equal to, and then we'll do my context dot classes. And now here we can do some link. And I have a video on link too. If you're interested, just take a look at my channel and go through the videos. You'll see one on how to use link. If you press dot again after that and you don't see, where or any of those type of things, it's probably because you're missing the reference to link. So go to the top and just do using system.link. So now you could do dot where. Here I'm just going to use C for classes, equal sign, and we'll just do the method syntax here. And we'll just do C dot, and you could pick anything here. So let's say we wanted to get the class where, you could do my class names in class name. If you had a list of class names you want to compare against, anything you want to do here, why don't we just say we want to get everything where the max class size is greater than 0. That's going to give us all the classes in the results. And then we're going to go ahead and get the result into a list because it is linked. It's lazy because it's linked. It won't be evaluated right away unless we either do something with it or move it to a list. So we'll do toList, and that way I could set a breakpoint and see what the value is. I don't have to do a print statement or something for it to execute the query. So I'll just put a breakpoint here at the end, and we'll run this. Now it's at the breakpoint. I can hover over my classes. As you could see, it found 2 results. First one is my first class, French, and then my second class, which is English, with class size 25. Let's go ahead and do an update as well. So I'm going to delete everything here, but I'll keep the saved changes. And instead of doing where, we'll do first or default, which means if you can't find it, it's going to be null, but it'll give us a result. We don't need 2 lists because it's just going to be creating 1 record. And instead of my classes, let's just call it my class because it's singular. And then here, we could do my class dot, and we'll change the name to changed name, exclamation point. And then we'll save changes. So what we're doing here is we're getting a record out of the database, we're changing one of the columns, and we're saving it. That's going to generate an update statement in SQL. I don't need the breakpoint because we're going to look at the results in SSMS. Let me go ahead and run that. F5. Bingo. All right, let's go to SSMS, and let's select from the classes. And there you could see changed name in the class. It's that simple. Now you've seen everything you needed to get started with Entity Framework Code First. Hope you enjoyed it. Put some requests out there in the comments for my future videos, and I'll see what I could do. Thank you.